We're going to get into it. We're going to talk about the power and kind of the power imbalance of media, just a couple of terms of just kind of level setting around what media is and what we mean when we refer to the media landscape, interview best practices, and Cam is going to walk us through kind of how to talk to media at protests and everything to know before going into that, and also a couple of messaging items and things like that. So again, let us know at any point if you have questions, if you want to hone in on something, just put it in the chat box. Becca will let us know. And we'll just kind of get right into it. There'll also be a time for Q&A at the end as well. Awesome. So I think just before we kind of dive into the best practices and the tips is just kind of acknowledging, I've been working at Advocates for the past 2 years, and we work a lot with youth activists on sharing their stories and also being experts in media when it comes to young people's sexual health and rights, and also changing their culture in their communities and on their state level. But it's something that I always tell all of our youth activists in every cohort is that really the same kind of structures and the same isms that we're fighting right now, all of that is represented in media. So I'm sure all of you know the recent reports of like Bon Appetit and like other media industries really come into like reckonings because of their tilted coverage, because of the lack of diversity in their newsroom. So that's just to say that this is definitely an opt-in situation, and we're not saying that you should always think about media and always talk to media and always go to press with all of your issues, but we're just acknowledging that media does have, in our experience, a lot of power to transform not only laws, but also just the culture. And whether it's op-eds from young people in Arkansas calling out the state's really, really ridiculous HIV stigma laws, or if it's people on the Abortion Out Loud campuses who are working to make sure that abortion is included in their college campus, putting pressure on their colleges through LTEs, through op-eds and things like that. So I think I just wanted to give some more context in terms of how we approach it, and then give you a couple of examples of how we go about that, just making sure young people are at the center of all of our work when it comes to interacting with the media. And I'll let Cam share a few words about their context as well before we start the conversation.
Hey y'all, so we're hoping that this space will give y'all the opportunity to learn about the relationship between media and activism and community organizing. We also want you to know that building relationships with the media is a strategy that should be beneficial to growing your reach and important to changing narratives. We also want to give you an abundance of skills to build your collective and individual power and agency around engaging with media. We will discuss some scripts for talking to media while on the ground. We will also explore how abolition politic is vital in not only overall messaging for fighting against injustices, but also important in how we engage with media in relationships to their proximity to the state and thinking about their reoccurring violence. I want you to leave this space feeling empowered in your brilliance and your vision for the future, and also want to like uplift the current campaign that I've been supporting, Defund MPD, which is the campaign to defund the DC Police Department. And there's Black youth who's leading this campaign, and their demand is that they want police out of schools. So keeping that in context in our conversation of how we're fighting and how we can use the media for our own agency.
Thank you so much, Cam. And a couple of items that we have is just kind of talking through a couple different phrases, words that you've probably heard. There's OTR, not to be confused with Beyonce and Jay's On the Run. It's on the record where your name is attached. Basically, Rebecca said this. Cam of this organization, Cam said this. It's really just that your name is attached, your first and last name, usually sometimes your first name. And these are all things that you can talk about with a reporter and kind of negotiate before the interview. Just know that all of it should be agreed upon before you actually start the interview. And it's kind of like my best practice to always consider yourself on the record unless a clear agreement is to be made. And usually if you're at protest and like if you're at direct actions, it's kind of going to be apparent that you're on the record. And I think that's just something that you have to understand your risk levels, whether you want your first name attributed to it, whether you want your first and last name, whether you're not comfortable at all sharing your name. And that's something that you have to explore yourself. And it's definitely something that we help youth activists with in terms of kind of becoming confident in what they are willing to share and what they're not. Then you have off the record, which is that it sounds, your name is not attached, it's not attributed to anyone. This is when you hear like sources say, or like anonymous sources say, or per sources, it's just off the record commentary, but it's not retroactive. So if you're at a protest and you're feeling good about it, and about the interview, and you're going through the interview, and all of a sudden you want to take everything you said before that off the record, usually that's not how it works, and it kind of, you can't put it back in. So that's why I say just make sure that you're comfortable with what you are willing to share, and getting an explicit agreement, whether it's an email or in person, that what you're saying is off the record. But again, I think for all of these purposes, you're probably going to be on the record. And I think it's something that I've been really impressed with a lot of on like activists coming out with different ways to like blur images and blur photos, and like tools that you can use to really make sure that you understand your risk level. So I would just say to sit with that, decide for yourself what your risk level is when it comes to sharing your name and things like that. And then on background is just no specific attribution. It's just kind of you're serving as a research kind of point of contact for people without your name being attached. So that's just kind of 3. There's a lot more, but just I think those are the ones that I wanted to make sure you're all aware of. And I'll just see if Cam has any additions, so kind of like any media lingo or words that we may need to spell out for the audience before going into depth.
I think I'm good as far as like language. The only thing I would just suggest is that for me, I think it's always the best practice to always act as if you're on the record with media, because I think that line is often blurred. So like, don't necessarily say anything to the media if they claim you are off the record in response to like a tactic that you have or something you have planned that you may not want a community of people to know.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Cam. The next up, just going a couple of interview best practices. Again, we're only selecting the ones that kind of are most relevant when you're talking about either engaging with the media during a protest or talking with media around a direct action. A couple of things is just like, one, are you the right spokesperson? I think sometimes we think with media, it's like when someone asks you something, like you have to respond right then, and you like have to know what you want to say, and you have to say yes because it's such this opportunity. But at the end, again, you have to realize kind of what you're willing to risk and what it is that you're kind of who you're talking to in the publication you're speaking to. And so allowing yourself that time to figure out, am I the best person to speak to this issue, or is there someone maybe directly impacted by the issue you're talking about that is better suited? I always recommend you to have kind of partners, allies, other experts that you really trust, and you can just refer. I think something that a lot of people recently, I wish we were doing more of, is a lot of, because of the diversity when it comes to sources, is that white sources, if they're being requested for commentary on the protest or anything related to that, they're passing it off to other Black community organizers. And I think that is the best practices that I would recommend. And just make sure you're the actual right spokesperson before you do it. This, to sum it up, class, is basically it. You don't have to be the right spokesperson all the time. And that's okay. It's okay to pass the mic. So just remember that. And I would just say, have like a list of, people that you're cool with, that you trust and they respect, and things like that. Don't automatically give a reporter someone else's name without checking with them first, especially when it comes to protest. Always confirm before sharing anything. And I usually don't even recommend sharing phone numbers and things like that anyway. So just be mindful. And remember, again, like you don't always have to respond to every media request or every reporter that's on the ground at the protest. You have to decide, is this right for the movement? Will it harm the movement? Is it something that I'm not as confident on messaging wise? And would it be better suited for someone who's been doing the work more at the front lines or things like that? Just thinking about like how you identify yourself. I mean, I think it's really helpful just to memorize a couple of lines so that when you are at a protest and you are or at a direct action, that you know kind of who you're representing. Is it your local organizing chapter? Is it your school district? What is it that, who are you representing, and making sure that you're comfortable in saying that, and usually just coming up with a couple of lines of like who you are, like a quick like bio in your social media, just like that, except how you would explain it and how you would want it honestly written in press. Kim, would you have any like helpful tips on that? As like, because I know, especially like when you're at a protest, when you're at a direct action, there's a lot going on. And so do you have any tips on like how to make sure you're prepared before going into these situations?
Yeah, I think I'll talk about it a little bit more in the future,
Awesome.
but I think it's definitely important to have specific roles when you're on the ground. So, hey, this is
Yes.
our media person. This person,
Yeah.
whenever we see media, we're going to direct media to this specific person, and that person should already be like skilled with like, hey, you should maybe have a script going, and like what
Hmm.
things does that like help strengthen what you're going to say, because the media person is already like privy to what they'll say. So just
For
having
sure.
a role.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important. I mean, and also just like knowing that going in, so you're not just making assumptions on the fly. I think one of the, first instincts is that when you're doing an interview, whether it's with your local reporter or on the phone, that you just automatically, or in person, you automatically assume it's like an in-person conversation. And I think people get tripped up a lot on this because it's really not a conversation between you and the reporter. It's a conversation between you and their audience, because the reporter is taking down notes and going to release something for a specific set of audiences. So you have to know that, like, knowing that going in, that you shouldn't treat the interview like a conversation, but you're trying to talk to the audience. And I think a lot of people automatically, when they get in front of a camera or on a radio, they just like they use a lot of like lingo, a lot of acronyms and things like that. But it's really important that all your language is accessible when it comes to media, and that not only, the people in your group chats understand what you're talking about, or the themes or the frameworks that you're talking about, to make sure that people who may run across your interview on TV or radio still understand your actions, still understand what you're asking people to do, and why you're out there, and what the direct ask is. I'm going to hand it over to Cam, who's going to go a little bit more in depth about kind of logistics and best practices when it comes to speaking to media at protests.
Hey, so first, I definitely want to stress this. I think some folks who like do movement work build a practice of this idea of holistic energy. So like we come as our whole self. When we come into a room, we can like literally change that space. And so first and foremost, I want like y'all to know, folks to know that like you got this. Like you have the experience, and I think it's important to like consider that in your work. Like sometimes people think it's like theorists and philosophers are the people who like gatekeep and hold information, but the folks that are actually on the ground and like literally doing this work are the people that are the key. So be confident in that. Like, this issue, this is something that probably impacts you personally or friends so be confident in being able to speak to the media. I also want to talk a little bit about like that specific type of agency that you have. So if you are in conversation with the media and something comes up and you feel like that person may be agitating you, which has happened, but not to say it always happens, I think it's important just to exercise the ability to walk away. And like the media needs you, and they need this information from you to legitimize their story, not the other way around. Next slide, please. And so important things to include when talking to media: be clear, get to the point. We'll talk about a little bit some more like a specific script, but identify who media is. If there's a group of y'all, maybe have the media person wearing a specific color or a bandana on their arm or something to be easily identifiable. But be clear about what you're asking for, and don't necessarily get caught up in emotions, because I think that's definitely important for our narratives. But you only have so much amount of time to like get this story out. So you want to be clear, introduce yourself, your pronouns, what organization you're a part of, and list your demands, values, and how it relates to why you're currently there. And so, for example, Black youth, who I'll speak again, who have been leading the Defund MPD campaign, their demand is no police in schools. And so they've been really reiterating that. And I don't know if folks have been following a lot of the murals that have been around the nation, but folks have engaged in murals in different ways to like build their messaging around that. So again, include a call to action when you're having conversations. So you can be like, hey, my name is this person, my pronouns is this, I'm from this organization, and this is our demands, and then this is what we're asking for. as well as if you want them to like follow you on social media or how you want them to continue to plug in with the movement. That's really important. If there is like a budget, I would say the person that is talking to the media could have on like a t-shirt or some type of language around what the campaign is in order for people to be able to catch that and know clearly what the issue is and how you're there and what you're demanding. And so, yeah, again, a designated media team person. And I think it's very important when you're planning actions and protests to practice. Like practice what you're going to say, practice how y'all are going to like march in, practice how y'all are going to march out, have a plan. And I think the media person is very vital to this plan because the media person will already know, hey, I should like identify this messaging for when I'm talking to the media. Hey, I should show up this particular kind of way, and also be privy to the questions that could come up while in conversations with media. And again, stressing the idea of like, if you're in an interview and you feel like someone may be like ignoring the messaging or not hearing you, think about it as a way to like engage with them and being like, hey, we have a message. And if you feel like that's being like hindered, using their own agency around like engaging with the interviewer or like calling them out on that or walking away, but whatever feels comfortable and safe for you in that moment. And so sample script, I think scripts are so important because they just give us a great way to like know where we're going and know what it is. So, hey, my name is Cam. My pronouns are they, them. I am a youth organizer with this organization, Black Youth Project 100. Our demands is that we want the police defunded full-time and all positions. We want police out of schools, and we want a community-led investment in the future, right? So we want mental health facilities, right? We want reproductive rights. We want public housing and public education. And so depending on time, again, so details that don't necessarily have to be more specific. So again, name, who you're with, demands, and a call to action is a great way to get people like mobilized around like, this person made it super clear what their ask is. They had a person already designated to be the media person, so communication was kind of clear, and it wasn't like a media person or interviewer running around and us running around trying to figure out who would like handle that.
Awesome, thanks Cam. And Cam's gonna walk us through, after we go through this section, some messaging to also add to that script of kind of a problem solution action. It's a framework that we use here. And it's just basically kind of the starting point for how we recommend starting like Facebook event invite pitches, media talking points, whether it's a tweet, whether it's a call to action, a Zoom conversation, just anything. This is how we just recommend framing it when it comes to getting someone and getting someone to act, whether it's calling a representative, whether it's showing up in a direct action, whether it's donating, things like that. Because everything for us really does focus on getting people to act, right? Like we just don't want to share our stories and our experiences and just people, you know, to sit on their asses. We want people to really tag in with us in the movement and support people on the front line, and also get us into this kind of future that hopefully we're envisioning together. So first is a definition. So problem solution action stands for a good message is a short, compelling roadmap, and it does three things. It first defines the problem that you're trying to solve. Two, outlines what it is your vision for solution is, really that recommendation phase. And then three, it offers specific actions that your audience can take to solve the problem that you just told them about. And again, this isn't just for like talking to media. It's not just for talking points. It can be for how you compose tweets or how you compose an op-ed or how you do phone banking, things like that. It's just really about kind of being focused. And as Cam was saying, being really prepared so that your organization, whether it's a school group or your campus or it is a local organization, having problem solution actions that you all agree on as a unit is going to just make everything else easier when it does come time to communicating that for people to take action. So let's just go in quickly on kind of the individual components. So first is the problem, and we want this first kind of your first introduction, your first impression. We want it to kind of outline a problem that your target audience is, so whoever you're talking to will feel is urgent and affects them or people they care about. I think when we're talking about media, we have to understand that a lot of people, whether they're listening to now this video or they're watching a podcast, like a lot of the time just with human nature, it's like, what's in it for our community? What's like, how does this affect me? Why now? Is it something that I need to do this moment, or is it something that can wait till next year? So your problem really has to make sure that it frames it as a problem that is urgent, because obviously it is, and affects someone or someone they care about. I think this is also another situation where you can opt in. You can use this framework however you see fit and however it fits your politic or it fits your organization's like issue areas. But this is how we frame the problem solution action, is framing the problem broadly but clearly. And then we want people who listen to the problem or hear the problem or agree that it's a problem to work with us on a solution, right? We want them to do something. We want them to act. So the solution part of this message really focuses on what the answer to the problem is. And I think to get to what Cam was talking about is really just the autonomy and the confidence, right? Like you, if you're a directly impacted person, like you know what's best for your community and for your people, right? Like you are the expert in your own experience. So really making sure that you're laying out your solution to make sure that people can kind of work with you to get to the action. I think you see a lot of with solution is really kind of values based. I think that's just normal of movement spaces, like free Palestine, free freedom, Black Lives Matter, mattering is a value. So really using value language, because it shows, and I think these movements prove, which has mostly been led by young people, that it helps get people to take action with you. And the last one is action part of the problem solution action framework. And we'll go over this together and we'll answer any questions and things like that as well. But the action tells your target audiences what they can do to help you solve the problem. And it should be, again, depending on your politic and what your organization's mission is, it should be feasible. So usually I tell our youth activists or our staff that, like, if you are wanting someone to sign this petition or wanting someone to help you change something, whether it's getting comprehensive sex ed in school districts, whether it's getting police out of schools, it has to be something that a lay person feels is like feasible and specific. So whereas like I can't go out and like, you know, like if the action is just go out and change hearts and minds, that's really vague, right? Like how do we do that? Like what is it? What's the actual action? Because without that, you're not allowing people to take the action with you. You're not making it urgent. So instead of change hearts and minds, when you're talking about getting police out of schools, when you're talking about a sex ed curriculum, it's like show up at this school board meeting. It's email this person. It's donate this fund, because that is specific. It's something I can do in the next 10 minutes. I think that's the best practice. It's just something that someone could feasibly do within the next 10 minutes. Can they go run for an elected position in the next 10 minutes? Probably not. Can they put a meeting on a calendar? Yes. Can they donate? Yes. Can they join a direct action that's happening in their community? Yes. So I would just encourage everyone to think through their own problem solution actions. Again, it's just a framework, and it's really just focused on helping you frame your tweets and your messages and your talking points and your interviews in a way that gets people to do a specific action. I'm going to pause there for Cam to kind of take over when it comes to kind of this moment and this specifically what a problem solution action could look like.
Yeah, and I do want to mention a little bit more around this, like, I guess, overall energy for when we're talking to media. For me, a lot of that has been rooted in a prison abolition politics. So this idea that, like, yeah, what we're asking for, we have a specific demand, but we do have a broader demand. We do have like a world we want to see, and we do, when we're asking for specific things, like being issue driven, so reproductive rights, housing rights, and things like that. It serves a larger purpose. So that's a part of the larger idea around like, how do we create a world that we want to see? How do we create a world where everyone is valued and whole? And I'm part of that. And so I think that's also like something important to like think when you're talking to media and like constructing a narrative around like, hey, we're here today for this specific thing, but our overall goal is this. This is the future that we want to see. And this is just maybe one issue toward moving towards a future that we want to see. And so the example, the problem, the mayor is trying to build a new jail with $800 million. The council will vote on the budget in 2 weeks. And so this is like a problem that's happening in a lot of places. So this is a real thing. And like the way that budgeting and like voting and like working with electoral politics is a whole another conversation as well. But like sometimes these budget votes happen really quickly. Like a lot of folks won't know, they'll pass a budget and then we see a new facility, and we know that like when new jails come, Black and brown folks will be the folks that will be filling those jails, and we don't want that. And we also want to redefine how we think about the idea of criminality as well, but that's a different conversation. And so the budget vote is happening in 2 weeks. The solution is we want the council to reject the budget and ask the funds be used for community-led resources. So not only do we want the city council to reject this $800 million, we want them to propose that this funding can go towards, again, mental health facilities. What does it look like for public housing to exist and not just affordable housing, which I hear a lot of conversations about? What does it look like for public education to exist? And not charter and private education. And so, yeah, I think a lot of times when people say, oh, people have ideas about abolition, but they don't have any solutions. And so that is the solutions, right? We want the people in our community to be making the decisions about how money should be spent in their communities. And I think that's like a real tangible thing to happen. And so the call to action is we are asking all the folks who do not want a new jail to be built, join our call-in days, Monday and Friday. And so that's a specific tactic that sometimes community organizers use as a way to not only agitate the target, so the council members could be a potential target or someone you're like looking to get to change their perspective or change their vote. It's a great way to like measure our reach as well. So we could be like, hey, on Monday we held a call-in day. We had 2,000 people call in. Great. So what do we want to do from Monday to Friday to double the call-ins, right? And so how can we mobilize in our community? How can we reface? How can we post posters on polls? How can we talk to families? How can we canvass? How can we DM our friends in our community about what's happening in like a 2 sentences to just get them to engage with us, right? And give them the call to action. So texting a friend you haven't spoke to in a couple years to be like, hey, this impacts you. Can you join our call-in day is important as well. And so a call-in day is a way for folks to engage. They can do it at home. And it can be an easier way to engage in the action, and is a great way to be able to measure the engagement as well, and being like, hey, this week we had 7,000 folks call in because they didn't want the council to vote to approve a new jail to be built. What does it look like to then hold council members accountable because of the way that y'all like kind of rallied in action to come up with these folks who like are in support of an issue? And then again, like from building from this conversation and this action, in what ways can you continue to engage the people in your communities? What does it look like to hold a public education like outside a laundromat? What does it look like to engage with folks a different kind of way, and be able to build like your individual and collective power?